Welcome to Betrayal Narrative X.
It didn't start with a scream or a fight or a premonition that makes your hair stand on end. It started with a notification on the screen of the office phone. One of those rare cases when a weekday decides that it's tired of being gray and unnoticeable, and it drops something on you after which neither coffee nor reports nor meetings make any sense. Let's get acquainted. Write in the comments what city and country are you from? David opened the message automatically just to clear the notification. The screen lit up and his eyes caught the words that weren't exactly meant for him, but were addressed to his number. He didn't even realize what was happening at first. He read it once, then a second time, then a third slowly, as if each word were a nail and he were the hammer. I can't forget how you were inside me last night. Your scent is still on my skin. Will there be a repeat tonight? He stared at the screen and felt something crawling inside him, not pain, not rage, not even jealousy. Just a sticky, unpleasant sensation, as if someone had poured motor oil in his ears. He didn't immediately realize who had written it. The number was hers, Karen, his wife, the same one who complained every morning about insomnia, back pain, and the fact that they had no spark left. At that moment he did not even feel betrayed. His first emotion was bewilderment. How absent-minded does one have to be to send a love letter to her husband and to his work number? Or was it not a slip, but an unconscious desire to be exposed? As a way of not dragging this farce any further? He didn't answer. He didn't make a phone call. He just got up, grabbed his jacket, and walked out of the office without saying a word to anyone. Walked home almost 5 miles down sidewalks, through parking lots, past noisy cafes, over a bridge where the wind blew, and every step echoed deafeningly inside. When he got home, Karen was in the kitchen washing grapes. She looked like her usual self, sporting tights, an old college t-shirt, her hair in a careless bun. She hadn't even noticed that he'd come in earlier than usual. "Enjoy your meal," he said, and placed the phone on the table screen up. Karen looked at him, then at the phone. And that was it. No panic, no tears, no, it's not what you think. She didn't even try to hide her face or erase her expression of indifference. "So you saw it," she said, as if it was about a missed credit card payment. He was waiting for something. Maybe an automatic excuse, maybe a scene, maybe at least some pretended remorse. But instead she wiped her hands on the towel and said without looking at him, "You and I have just been living under the same roof for a long time. You're cold, distant, we're like neighbors. I didn't want it to be like this, but you knew it was over too." He stood leaning against the door jamb, staring at her, as if she were an actress in a cheap soap opera. Little things came to mind. How she'd asked him to bring her tea in bed, how she'd complained that he didn't cuddle enough, how she'd said she wanted more feelings. And there it was, feelings. How many were there? He asked, already knowing he was unlikely to hear the truth. She shrugged. The gesture threw him off balance, more than the cheating itself. "I don't know. A few. It doesn't matter. We were dead a long time ago anyway." He wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny. It was because he was facing a woman who had just diagnosed a marriage as dead without giving up the refrigerator, the laundry room, or access to a joint account. "You know, if you listened to me at least once a year, maybe things would be different," she added, looking like she'd just won an argument. He left that same night. No arguing, no slamming doors, no "I hate you." He just packed a couple bags, got in his car, and drove to his childhood friend Gary. He didn't ask any questions. He just brought out a beer and said, "You can stay for a month if you want." The next morning Karen wrote, "You acted like a child. We're adults. This was all something we could have discussed." He didn't answer. There was too much to discuss. Like how long you could share a bed with someone who led a parallel life. Or how to be polite when you find out you've been lied to for years. Or why the exact moment you stop tolerating is suddenly considered immature behavior. It wasn't just cheating. It was a breach in a wall that hid dozens of other cracks. He didn't yet know that the nastiest was yet to come. For now it was just the first layer of lies that hid other faces, other men, other correspondences. And then there were the silent participants who knew and kept silent. But that night, as he fell asleep on the couch in Gary's living room, David caught himself thinking of one thing. For the first time in a long time, he didn't have to pretend he was doing well. Waking up on Gary's couch to the hoarse breathing of his Labrador, David didn't realize where he was at first. The room was filled with soft gray light, the kind of light that comes in early spring when the sun seems to have come out of hibernation, but is still shy of shining. A Labrador named Chester lay at his feet snoring, and judging by the twitching paws, hunting imaginary pigeons. Something was rattling in the kitchen, metallic, confident, as if Gary were trying to make coffee and put on a musical pot show at the same time. David got up, rubbed his eyes, and went over there hoping the coffee wasn't just brewing, but pouring into cups. Gary stood at the stove in his tomato sauce-stained t-shirt and cooked oatmeal, muttering curses to himself that included the words "damn stove" more often than "good morning." He glanced at his friend, nodded, and said without pathos, "So what's it like to wake up a bachelor with a hangover, but no wine?" David sat down at the table and stared silently out the window. He knew that the conversation was inevitable, but he didn't want to start it himself. Not because he couldn't, but because he was tired of even thinking about it. "Look," Gary began, setting the steaming cup in front of him. "I always thought Karen was, well, peculiar. But this is the level of hold my glass. I'll show you how to destroy trust in 5 seconds. She says I was aloof," David replied, not taking his eyes off the parapet outside the window. "As if that gave you the right to fuck anyone. It's not an excuse, it's a pretext. Believe me, my first wife had 8 such excuses, each with a name and address." David grinned, but the smile was sluggish, mechanical, like that of a man to whom a joke is understandable but not funny. "She said several," he continued. "And that was the word that got to me the most. Not one, not even 2, several. It was like she was choosing at a wine tasting. 'Oh, let me try this one too, it's supposed to be full-bodied.'" Gary shook his head, exhaled through his teeth, and sat down across from him. "Do you want to know everything? Or do you want to just cut and forget? Can we do both? Recognize it freaked the fuck out, and then forget it anyway?" Just then the phone rang. David looked at the screen. Karen. He didn't answer it. A minute later a message came through. "I need to talk. Not for a scandal. It's important." He put the phone back on the table, as if it were a piece of radioactive iron. Then he got up, grabbed a cup, and went out into the backyard. There was a table, a couple of plastic chairs, and an ashtray that still held a cigarette, but that had been left behind, judging by the layer of ash, in a bygone era. He smoked even though he'd already quit years ago. He just wanted to do something that he wouldn't have approved of yesterday. It even felt like he was looking at himself from the outside like a character in a bad movie in which the predictability of the plot was taken to farce. A man finds out about an affair, leaves, smokes at dawn, drinks coffee, and stares into the void. Somewhere off-screen, there's probably some cheap blues playing. Half an hour later, he did call. Karen answered immediately, as if she were sitting there with the phone in her hand waiting. "Thanks for calling me back." Her voice was tired, but not crying. Karen never just cried. Tears were a strategy, not an emotion. "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But I need to tell you something. Let's not start with 'it was both of our faults,'" he said. "If we're going to take the blame, at least don't split it in half." She was silent for a moment. Then she spoke a little more softly. "I wasn't using protection. I might be pregnant." He didn't say anything. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because he had a list in his head. Who the father was, when was the last time, why was she saying this now? He paused, but a familiar bell rang inside, the one that always does when someone tries to play the manipulative card in front of you again. "Congratulations. Just this time, please don't make me a father. I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know. So you're not asking, you're blackmailing," politely, he said, and pressed end call. Later that day, he met Janet, the wife of one of his acquaintances, Brian. They had crossed paths at the supermarket, and the conversation, which had begun with polite phrases, had suddenly turned in a very different direction. "Look," Janet said, looking at him with a strange kind of longing. "I know what you're going through. And you probably don't need this, but I've noticed for a long time that Karen has some strange views on boundaries in relationships. It's just that no one's ever said it before. We all thought it's their business." Those words hurt. Not because he was expecting support, But because behind them there was a whole layer of people who always guessed, but kept silent because it was none of their business. He drove home and felt that there were still many doors in this story, and all of them were slowly beginning to open. The ironic thing was that even after she'd said she was pregnant, real or fictitious, who knows, he still caught himself thinking, what if she was? What if she wasn't lying? What if he was leaving a woman at her most vulnerable moment? The sneaky power of the old attachment didn't let go as easily as he would have liked, and it made him angrier than the betrayal itself. He'd been walking around all day with that inner itch like a splinter under his fingernail. Her words echoed in his head over and over again like a ruined audio tape that someone had forgotten to turn off. And for a moment he caught himself doing something even worse, wanting to check, wanting facts, specifics, not out of interest, but out of principle. If everything had collapsed, let it collapse completely without any illusions left. Fortunately, or cursedly, her old tablet was still in his drawer at work. He'd taken it there himself. Once Karen often left it in the hallway, and at some point he decided it was better here than searching between the pillows again. When he opened it, the password had entered itself for birthday, which he'd always resented him for forgetting. Messages, messengers, and even old mail were synchronized on the tablet. It felt as if he had opened not just a device, but a portal to a parallel universe where his existence had only background significance. The messages ranged from banal flirting to detailed descriptions of encounters. Some names he knew, others he was seeing for the first time. But one in particular caught his eye: Joshua's name. He'd seen this Joshua at their house a few times. Once he'd come over for a barbecue with his wife, both of them smiling, sweetly discussing baseball betting, Karen laughing at his jokes. At the time it had all seemed harmless, even boring. Now David read lines like, "You're the best because you know how to touch a woman, not like my robot husband." And their past conversations about trust, honesty, support came to mind. He flipped through the dialogues like a judge flips through a dossier before passing judgment. Everything that had been invisible before was now coming into view, aggressively, cynically. A subscription to a fitness club where she supposedly went alone. The evenings when she'd stayed over at a friend's house. The time she said she was leaving to visit her mother in Sacramento, while simultaneously texting Joshua about hotel reservations. His hand trembled. He wasn't ready to accept this in any mature or adult way. He felt everything turning over inside, not from jealousy, not from resentment, just from the fact that he'd been lied to straight to his face for years without shame or even much ingenuity. The worst part is Joshua was married, and to a woman David respected. Laura was the kind of woman who brought apple pies for the holidays, always interested in how they were doing, and when David's father died, she'd written the warmest letter of condolence. At this point, the decision came naturally. He wasn't going to take revenge. He didn't want a scandal. It was just that Laura must know, as he knew, as anyone had a right to know if they lived next to someone who turned life into a theatrical production. He found Laura's number in the common group where they had once discussed a children's party for the neighbor's children. Texted briefly, "We need to talk. It's about Joshua. Important. No spam, no mistake." The answer came quickly. Laura suggested meeting at a cafe near the park where they had all once gone for summer picnics. There was something symbolic about everything returning to the same point, but with a different meaning. When she entered, he stood up. She realized at once that this was no trivial conversation. Her face didn't pale, she didn't cry out, she didn't faint. She just looked at him expectantly, that special look of a woman who senses that something important is about to happen, but is ready for it in advance. "I don't know how to say this gently," he began. "So, I'll be blunt. Karen was having an affair with Joshua. For a long time. Maybe not just with him, but with him for sure. I've seen it. The messages. Dates. Photos." Laura was silent for a long time. Then she nodded slowly and suddenly exhaled. "I had a hunch. I've known for a long time. But when you live with a person who always explains and twists things, you start to doubt yourself. You think maybe you're going crazy. Maybe you're just jealous. But I knew. I was just afraid to admit it." Laura left the cafe quickly, not dramatically, almost businesslike. She thanked David, hugged him briefly, not in a friendly way, but not in a feminine way, more like a person who had just been released from a moral prison. He looked at her and realized that he was not the only one who had broken out of the cage, but everyone had his own. Later that day, Karen wrote again. The message started out unexpectedly polite, as if nothing had happened. "I found your old plaid. Do you want me to bring it over?" He didn't reply. 2 hours later came the second. "I feel broken. Even if you hate me, I still care how you are. Tell me you're okay." He wasn't lying. He wasn't okay. But not in the way she'd imagined. He wasn't hitting dishes, sobbing into his pillow, trying to drown the pain in his temples. Karen didn't calm down. The next morning, a mutual acquaintance called. Anthony, the same one who had once tried to start a family friendship with them, but ended up being more Karen's friend than David's. "Look," he began, with strained politeness, "Karen was at my place yesterday. She's really worried. She says you don't even want to talk. I just think you're both adults. Maybe we should try to have a civilized conversation." David listened and almost enjoyed that voice. So smooth, almost corporate, as if he were counseling a client on a mortgage rather than prying into someone else's personal drama. He thanked Anthony for his concern, said he'd already told Karen everything in person, and hung up. After that, he deleted Anthony's number. Simply because he was tired of people calling interference, caring, and betrayal complicated relationships. 2 days later, he received a notification from his banking app. Karen had withdrawn money from their joint account. The amount wasn't catastrophic, but it was noticeable. He didn't call, just walked into the branch and processed the account split. The banker, in her 60s with a short haircut and a keen eye, looked at him over her glasses and said, "If I had $1 for every one of these cases, I wouldn't be in this chair anymore." He grinned and signed the papers. Later that evening, he opened the mail and saw the letter. The headline was dry: "Medical confirmation pregnancy." Karen had sent a scan form. No date, no last name, no doctor's signature. Just a snapshot of a page with stripes and the words "pregnant" handwritten on it. The handwriting was familiar. Hers. Didn't even bother to do a proper forgery. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even surprised. Just closed the letter without saving it and wrote back, "Karen, you are an inept liar. It's exhausting. Don't make an idiot out of me twice." She replied instantly, "I just want you to know what we could have had. Maybe you would have been different if I had been pregnant sooner." That sentence almost made him laugh. As if pregnancy were a spiritual ritual that could resurrect a dead marriage. As if a child was supposed to undo what 2 adults had jeopardized without the involvement of children. Meanwhile, Laura made her move too. A week later, Joshua moved out of their house. She didn't make a scene or hurl accusations. She simply packed his things and sent him a text, "I know. You're free. But so am I." David found out from herself when she wrote again. They didn't turn their acquaintance into an unhappy friendship, but she suggested they meet for coffee. Just a chat this time. No talk about Karen and Joshua and all the other garbage that lay in the past now. He said yes. Not because he was looking for a relationship or comfort. It was because she was easy. They sat in a small cafe eating muffins and discussing which of them hated the phrase, "everything happens for a reason more." He came in on Friday when David was washing the car outside Gary's house. The usual routine of soaping up the hood, listening to an old Eagles album, and thinking it would be nice to finally start living again instead of surviving between flashbacks. The car shined like it was going on a date, and there was something even therapeutic about rubbing the surface and imagining that everything else was going away with the dirt. A white pickup truck pulled up quietly, without pathos, parked on the curb. A man in a black jacket and a baseball cap, which he took off before coming closer, got out. He walked tentatively, but not fearfully. It was like he was rehearsing the scene in his head, but he still wasn't sure if he was doing the right thing. "Are you David?" he asked when he was close enough. David squinted his eyes, scrutinizing the face. Something was vaguely familiar, but he couldn't remember where he'd seen the man. He was tall, stout, in his 40s, his face tired, like someone who'd put off an unpleasant conversation for too long. "Depends on why you want it," David replied without wiping his hands. "My name is Alan. I think you know my last name if you look in Karen's cell phone." She and well, we were close. I'm here because I can't carry this anymore. He wasn't the first person Karen had used to play the alternate reality game, but he was the first to come himself. No shame, no pathos. Just a man who had a look on his face that said, I blew it. And now I don't know what to do about it. David remained silent. He didn't even feel angry. Rather, he wondered who he was, where he had come from, why he had come. Why would someone who had been involved in the deception suddenly decide to play the remorse card? I'm married, Alan continued, hiding his hands in his pockets. I was. Probably not anymore. It's all going to hell. But you know the weirdest thing? I never thought of myself as a bad person. Not before Karen. It was different with her. She knew how to talk, how to look, how to make you think you weren't cheating, just finding something you'd been missing all your life. Those words were painfully accurate. And David realized it at once. Karen really knew how to present cheating as if it were a philosophy. As if lying were not a sin, but a form of resistance to the boredom of everyday life. Why did you come to me and not to your wife? He asked, wiping his hands on a rag. Because she already knows everything. She left. Said I was a stranger. And she's right. I am. But you deserve to know that it wasn't just a few. There were more. A lot more. I watched her set it all up, how she messed with one then the next. And we all thought we were special. He didn't speak quickly, he didn't make excuses. Like a man who knows there will be no forgiveness. He didn't come to ask for it. He came because conscience is a tricky thing. It keeps silent for a long time, and then one day it wakes up and starts howling, so that it is impossible to sleep. You don't have to tell me anything, David said quietly. I've heard enough already. Yes, Alan nodded. But there's one thing you might want to see. He pulled a small, unremarkable flash drive out of his pocket and held it out to David. There's correspondence, voicemails, photos. I don't know why I kept all that stuff. I guess I wanted to prove to myself that it wasn't just lust. And now I don't know why I did it. Your truth is out there. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want you to know who you're dealing with. He left as quietly as he came. No scene, no apology, no theater. It took him a long time to put in his laptop. When he did open the folder, there were names, dates, voices, photographs taken surreptitiously in his own home. Sometimes right on his pillow. He'd look flip through read, and he wasn't angry anymore. Just fixated on the extent of the lies, like an investigator who finally had a complete dossier. The next morning he got up without turning on the light and walked past the mirror without looking in it. He showered, put on a shirt that had been hanging idle for a long time, brewed coffee in a cup given to Karen for their anniversary, and sat down at the table as if it were an ordinary day. But there were no ordinary days anymore. They were all divided into before and after days. At noon he drove to the lawyer's office. The reception area smelled of leather coffee, an expensive disappointment, the kind you smell in the air when people who have had something quietly but permanently ruined come in here. The lawyer was taciturn, precise, and unemotional. He asked a few questions. Names, dates, whether there were children, whether there was joint property, who was staying in the house, who was paying the balance of the loan. The reason for the divorce? He asked without taking his eyes off the keyboard. Multiple lies, cheating, and tired of my own naivete, David replied calmly. Or, if you want to be legally correct, irreconcilable differences. The lawyer nodded and noted something on the document. After signing the papers, he walked outside and felt quieter inside. Not lighter, no. Just quieter. It was as if the house, which had been drafty, had finally closed all the windows. Karen wrote that same evening. The message was long with a claim to depth. I realize everything is ruined. I'm not making excuses. I just feel like you're not doing this because you want to, but because you have to. I feel like there's still something between us. And I don't want to lose you for good. It hurts, and if you care, at least see me. Just once. No yelling. No drama. Just talk. He read it, and to his own surprise, felt neither irritation nor anger. Only a slight bewilderment at how confidently she continued to act, as if she were still in control of the script. He did not answer at once. He went home, went into the room where her things still remained, took out an old box in which he had once put unnecessary papers, and now put there everything that could remind him of her. Postcards, photos, a watch given as a birthday present, a book that had a bookmark with a "Love You Forever" note in it. Then he sat down at his desk and wrote to her. "I've met with the lawyer. The papers are ready. We can sign any day. I have nothing to discuss. I'm not angry, I'm not vengeful, I'm not hurt. I just don't want to go on living in a fake play. The realization came too late, and it doesn't matter anymore. Thank you for giving me a chance to see it. I hope you do too someday, just not through someone else's pain like I did." A half hour later, Karen texted, "You make it sound like I'm a monster. I'm just a human being. I'm confused. I was wrong. I wanted love, not destruction. You know how hard things have been the last few years." He didn't reread it. He just deleted it. Too many years of trying to hear, between the lines, what wasn't there. He wasn't going to be a cheap interpreter of other people's excuses anymore. The next morning, he took the box with her things to the post office. Sent it with no note, no wishes. Just a package with a return address to nowhere. And when he got home for the first time since the breakup, he felt like he was really alone. And that's not a bad thing. It's real. It's been a week since he sent the box. No reply, no call, not even a return receipt. One day, he took the car and drove without a route. Just pressed go and listened to the road. It sounded more honest than anything he'd heard in years. The asphalt under his wheels, the wind rustling through the ajar window, the radio, where someone with a hoarse voice talked about weather and death in the same sentence. He drove to a coastal town he hadn't been to since college. It was the same, there the wooden piers, the smell of fish, the old men playing dominoes in the parking lot. He got a room in a small hotel and walked to the ocean. Not for metaphor, not to melt the pain away. Just to sit. On the third day, the first time, he didn't think about Karen for a second. She showed up again. First the message, "I'm scared. I feel like I'm losing myself. Please don't close yourself off so completely. You were the only real thing in my life. Everything else is just mistakes. I don't want it to end like this. At least let me see you." He read those words without anger or even irony. A familiar manipulation, but no longer workable. He didn't answer. He just turned the phone off and put it in the drawer by the bed. That evening he sat in a bar, drinking cider and listening to the conversation of two elderly women at a nearby table. One of them told how she had divorced at 62 because she realized that her husband resembled a piece of furniture more than a person. The other laughed and said that at least furniture doesn't lie. He didn't interfere, didn't smile, didn't nod. He just listened. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a wreck to work with. He felt like an observer of life. Not aloof, not broken, but simply alive. Karen called the next morning. He saw the name on the screen and didn't pick up. An hour later again. Then again. The fourth time he answered. Not because he wanted to, but because he wanted to say out loud what he'd long ago realized. "I'm not coming," he said calmly, without pressure. "We have nothing left." "I don't want to lose you," she said quietly, almost in a whisper. "You lost me long before I left. I just didn't know it then. Now I do. And going back is like going back to a house with nothing burning but garbage in the fireplace." She stopped talking. Apparently, she was waiting for a sentence with a "but" in it. But there wasn't. Just the beeps. He hung up and turned off the sound. He returned to the city in the middle of the week, not because he was tired of the coast, not because he had decided something important. He just realized he wasn't running away anymore. Everything he'd been hiding from before had no power now. Not the memories, not the pictures, not even Karen's voice, which used to echo in his head like a hackneyed refrain. Gary met him at the doorstep with the invariable cup of coffee and a question without intonation. "Are you finally out of the swamp?" "Rather realized that it had long since dried up," David replied, smiling tiredly. He rented an apartment again, small, bright, with bare walls and minimal furniture. At first, everything seemed temporary, as if he would just sit it out, until better times, until new feelings, until fresh meaning. But then he caught himself that he felt at ease here. Even these walls, without pictures, seemed more honest than their former living room with Karen, where everything was beautiful but false. Every morning, he brewed himself a cup of coffee, taking his time. Watching the sun through the blinds, he felt that this ritual was also a form of freedom. Not because the coffee tasted good, but because no one pretended that everything was all right between them. He started walking more, going into stores without a purpose, talking to the barista, reading newspapers he hadn't read in 10 years. One day, he noticed that he had stopped replaying the past in circles. Not because he'd forgotten. It was because he didn't want to live in it anymore. Karen didn't call again. And that was important too. Not because of pride or control. It was just that, in that silence, he finally heard himself. The real one, the one without the role of husband, without the guilt, without the angst. And it turned out that voice wasn't broken or angry. It was just grown up. He met with Laura one more time, not as victims, not as exes. Just as people who shared a common deception and a common honesty, not to hide it. They sat in the same cafe, ate warm cinnamon rolls, and talked no longer about the past, but about what they wanted next. No promises, no plans. Just the fact that life goes on. And, in it strangely enough, there are still many bright spots. That evening he came home, opened his laptop, and started writing. Not for anyone, not with a purpose. Just to record everything that had happened. So he wouldn't forget what he was, and what he didn't want to be anymore. He wasn't looking for a finale, he wasn't looking for a moral. He just let the words lie on the screen as honestly as he once let the knowledge lie on the screen. It's over. And that's the beginning. He didn't take other people's dirt in public. He didn't post on social media. He didn't accuse. He didn't get smart. But he knew, if he could tell himself one important phrase, it would be this: you don't have to prove you're worthy of love anymore. Just live like you already know it. Now, if you've listened to the end, I want to ask you, would you want to know the truth if it ruined everything? What's more important? Saving the relationship or saving yourself? How much can one tolerate before silence becomes complicity? And is a person who once betrayed truly capable of regret? Write in the comments what you think. Would you do what David did? Or would you have chosen a different path? Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. If you like the story, please give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm show my content more often. If you are new to the channel, do not forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep making more stories for you.